What's up, Gould Miners? Today we welcome to the show Justin Sloan of Sloan Capital.
If you want to get to places that no one else is at, you have to be willing to make mistakes and have that mentality. And that's what makes us better. Stand up for what you really believe in, that thesis that maybe others don't believe in, or oh, my dad was a landlord and he lost his ass. You know, you should never go be a landlord. I heard that 100 times. And if I would have listened to that one person, I would never have a real estate portfolio.
Justin is a real estate entrepreneur that has spent the last 15 years growing a real estate empire and has now transitioned that success into growing and scaling a franchise restaurant model. Justin's business acumen definitely gives him a very interesting, unique, and fresh perspective, and he shares all of that with us in this episode. We start off the episode by talking about his early success selling cell phones and how he pivoted that success into real estate investing at such a young age. Later on in the episode, Justin shares his bet sizing strategy as it pertains to real estate investing and how you can use it as well to properly allocate and diversify your real estate investment portfolio. And finally, we spend a good portion of the time talking about Justin's new venture into Everbowl, which is a restaurant franchise model that he started investing in right at the start of COVID-19. July 2020, he decided to pivot and go into this business model. Justin paints a vision in this podcast for all of us in how he sees businesses like Everbowl and real estate investing melding together in the future, and how syndications like his will eventually end up owning and managing the businesses as well as the real estate. This investment blend of business plus real estate lends itself nicely to diversification as well as economies of scale, because in his words, if you can do one or two of these, you might as well do 50 to 100. Really great stuff in this episode. He is a big thinker, super strategic, and quite impressive. You really owe it to yourself to listen to this one, folks. Lots of gold nuggets in this one. Without further ado, let's welcome to the show, Justin Sloan. Justin, welcome to the Gold Mine.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great, man. I'm actually really excited to talk to you. You've got quite an interesting background. You obviously have a good business acumen plus a real estate acumen, and it's fun to be able to talk to people like you, because I feel like my background also real estate and business, and so when you kind of get someone that can speak both languages, it's pretty refreshing, and it's usually a fun time. So I know that you started off selling cell phones in high school. Is that?
Yeah. So I was a senior in high school, and every day at about 1 in the afternoon, when I would get out of my last class or so, would go to the local mall and sling cell phones until 9 o'clock every night. Even before that, was working at Radio Shack when I was 16. But it was weird because I could sell cell phones to people, but I couldn't actually sign a contract. So I had to wait till I was 18 to actually be able to get my own phone and stuff like that. But yeah, that was my early business life of, school wasn't quite for me. But I was pretty good at selling stuff. So as much as I could, and commission and go out there and hustle.
There had to have been some skills that you developed and lessons that you learned in that time when you were selling that eventually translated into your success as a real estate investor. What would you say some of those skills and lessons were?
Yeah. So when I started in cell phones, it was a really interesting time for me because I learned about commission, and, the more that you sell and the harder that you work, if you put all those together, you can really make a lot of money. I remember, as a senior in high school, I grew up with a single mom, 3 boys. And when my mom saw my W-2 or W-4 or whatever it is, it was more than she made when I was a senior in high school. And that was a really big awakening moment for me of realizing that, wait a minute, if you not only work really hard, but you work really smart, go hustle, fight for every sale, create relationships, do all of this, that magically more opportunities are presented in front of you, right? It's really weird. If you work harder, good things come. And I took that into real estate when the time came of, even though when I got into real estate, I still had some of my cell phone businesses. I'm sure we'll get into that. But that was ultimately taking that same hustle, go out there, eat everything, that we kill, go out, build another one, buy another one, flip another one, do this as many as I could. And all of a sudden you really get that compounding effect.
What was it that caused you, or what was that aha moment that allowed you to pivot into real estate investing? Because what I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't sound like you ever sold real estate, correct?
I actually do have my real estate license, but that came later down, and I really don't. I actually have my domain callanyoneButMe.com, and it actually Google searches for other realtors. So I am not a practicing realtor by any way, shape, or form. But so how did I flip from cell phones to real estate? I love that you say it was an aha moment, because it was more like an oh shit moment, where I had a great cell phone business. I had a lot of locations. We were doing a lot of revenue. We were making a lot of profit. And then the company that I was selling started making a lot of really bad decisions. Apple would not sell us the iPhone. The company had to sell off all of their towers and lease them back just to be able to afford the upgrades on those towers. There was this brick wall moment where my entire business came to a stop. And it was a point where I decided I no longer can open more cell phone stores, but I needed to find something else to invest in or something else to build. And I looked at every business that I could and everything. And then all of a sudden real estate just like hit me straight in the face. It made a lot of sense. I could do it on the time that I had free from my normal business. And so I did everything that I could to learn everything about real estate. I interviewed a bunch of property managers, talked to a bunch of agents, and just dove head in.
Got it. And so it was more, so it was more out of necessity. You're like, oh shoot, like I really got to make this thing happen, or like, I might like lose it all kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My cell phone business was growing. And then, like I said, brick wall. The company lost a third of their customers in 18 months. Like I said, we weren't even allowed to sell the iPhone. So the phones and devices that people wanted, we were no longer able to sell. And I had my eggs all in that basket. I'm not very shy about it. I was in my low 20s, of course I had everything in one basket. I was invincible. And then obviously that moment happened where you realize you're not invincible. And I'm really actually kind of glad it happened in my 20s. I don't want to be 65 and have everything in one basket and learn that lesson, right? At least I had time to rebuild. Yeah,
100%. Well, that begs the question though, like why real estate investing, right? Because like you were in sales. I could very easily think of like at least a dozen other industries that you could go into right away. Same skill set, go in, sell, maybe even start another business. But like real estate investing definitely has some sales elements to it, but like there's a lot of other things involved with it too. So what was it that drew you to investing as opposed to like just like another commission type of position or business?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've ever really thought specifically like that. I don't think the option of going and getting another job was on the table. I was still running this cell phone business, and we still had locations, and we still had leases and personal guarantees and all that kind of stuff. So you can't just walk away from it and go to zero. So we navigated, and we obviously had to downsize and make some tough decisions and all of that. But then, the question comes, what do you do with the money that you've earned, the money that you're still earning, and where do you put it? And so that's where, again, I researched anything and everything. I mean, an Italian ice company I can remember, and a cleaning franchise, and all these other kind of businesses that I thought I could scale. But I remember being in Philadelphia, actually with my cousin's husband, and was talking with him and just being brutally honest that like, man, like this sucks. This world that I'm in, this business that I chose, it's just, we've reached that time. And he goes, well, have you ever, looked at real estate? I was like, what do you, no, I don't have time to go, manage tenants and all this kind of stuff. And he actually said to me, well, why don't you hire a property manager? And I was so naive with real estate. I didn't even know what a property manager was. But at that moment, I realized that there was other things out there where I could put money in. If I could find the deal and create the deal flow, that somebody else would run that deal flow for me. And that's ultimately what I did. I went out, I interviewed a bunch of property managers. I asked them their opinions on the markets, what they thought was over-rented, under-rented, what was opportunities, what would they do if they were going to buy some real estate? Because ultimately, you want property managers to be managing properties they like and asset classes they like. And we ended up buying 2 multifamilies, just little small fourplexes. And I got my first dip into, real estate. And we didn't have to do anything for the first few months because it was 8 units. At 8 units were full. And then obviously as someone moved, then I learned that process and the next process and continue to grow from there.
That's awesome. So the first deal that you did, what was that one? So it was 2 fourplexes is what it was? Okay, two fourplexes. And you were looking primarily for cash flowing assets, I'm assuming, like things that were stabilized and that you could just kind of go in and start collecting checks.
Absolutely. Low risk, medium reward, something that I could put a property manager in place. We'd still cash flow. And essentially I could learn the business without having to take too much time away from my other business. I didn't want to, obviously on a fourplex that only rents for $600 a unit, you're not making thousands and thousands of dollars a month. We're making hundreds of dollars a month. But more importantly, learning a skill set that allows me to go compound and then find a better one and find another one. I got to the point where I was buying a rental house every month because I had this system where, okay, the second that a unit needs, I learned this system in fourplexes, right? Somebody moves out, new paint, new carpet, update this, change this, do this. And all of a sudden you can rent it for $750 a month, right? And I just started doing that with rental houses. Hey, I found this rental house, 3-bed, 1-bath slab. They all got the same paint color, the same carpet, the same cabinets, the same appliance, but nobody knew it. And so it was just all about creating that repeatable system that allowed us to scale. And, at some point you got to rip the Band-Aid off and learn the first time. And we made every mistake, believe me, I made every mistake you possibly can in real estate, but how do you learn if you don't try?
Right. And the important thing is that you took that first step. Why do you think it is so difficult for most people to even take that first step? What is it? Like, is it finances? Is it lack of education? Is it what is it?
Ego. I think in general, people are so afraid to lose and or be thought of as someone who loses. But the reality was, would you rather be thought of as someone who never does anything? And sitting by on the sidelines your entire life, being afraid to play in the game, just doesn't sound that interesting to me. But the reality is, if you find a good deal, if you've analyzed enough properties, if you see enough things, it's like if you're a baseball player, when you see that right pitch, it's time. And investing's no different. I think if people just simply educated themselves a little bit more, saw a few more pitches, then when that right one came in there, it'd be easier for them to act. But in general, it's so easy to go invest in the stock market and do all the basic things. But when you actually go start your own business, invest in a property, stick your neck out there to do something that everyone around you isn't willing to do, that naturally you're going to have people that point. And I think a lot of people's ego gets them in trouble, and they're afraid to potentially fail in front of people that they know.
That's really interesting. That's a really interesting perspective.
Let's go deep. I do. I think there's a lot of personality traits that happen with investing. I come from a poker background, and a lot of people treat investing like poker, and in poker, people will sit down at the table and they'll treat it like blackjack. They're gambling, right? They're putting all their chips in and they have the slightest little edge. But what they should realize is like, hey, if I play enough hands, I can get a lot more information. And then I understand where to go and put my chips in. And I just think that the more and more that we see a lot of hands, see a lot of pitches, see a lot of deals, that naturally when those moments happen of opportunities, that everybody is so much better prepared for them.
That's really interesting. Really, really interesting thought. And I like the poker analogy too. And wow. Yeah, it's fascinating because as you're saying all of this, right? Like I'm trying to think about the people that I know in my life who have been talking about doing the thing for so long, and then the people that actually do it. And yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that ego or fear of loss, really, like fear of losing in front of other people is probably pretty high up on that list. Pretty high up on that list.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to say that's the only reason. I just know, I know with a lot of people that I talk to that, comfort it's natural that we want to be comfortable, right? We're human beings. Nature is, I want to be in a 72-degree room. I want to drink my delicious Celsius. I want to have my meal that's prepared, right? All this kind of stuff. But when you actually want to do things that, if you want to get to places that no one else is at, you're going to have to do things that nobody else does. And when you're doing things nobody else does, there's no book for it, right? There's no book that tells me every mistake that I'm going to come across and I can read it and just learn I'm good to go. So you have to be willing to make mistakes and have that mentality. And that's what makes us better, and then every mistake that we make, let's just not make it again. And if we do that, then it's okay making mistakes. I want to make more mistakes. Now I'm changing my entire mentality around mistakes to, how many mistakes can I make? Because now I've learned 20 more lessons than everybody else in the same game. And, I can't tell you my entire career. Let's be real. I mean, you've started a number of businesses, done a number of things, whatever. You will not have everyone around you be supportive, right? And even the people that you think will be supportive will just kind of get quiet. And most people aren't used to that, right? We're used to people supporting us and cheering from us and all of that. But if you want to go do things, you have to be willing to go against the grain and to stand up for what you really believe in, that thesis that maybe others don't believe in, or my dad was a landlord and he lost his ass. And, you should never go be a landlord. I heard that 100 times. And if I would have listened to that one person, I would never have a real estate portfolio. When I wanted to, I started restaurants in the middle of the pandemic. You want to talk about having people tell me I'm an idiot? I literally, when restaurants were closing down and people were going out of business, I was going in and signing the leases of closed down restaurants and getting deals on them that nobody else could. And that's part of the game.
So, okay, let's talk about that, since you brought it up, and I was going to bring it up later, but let's just dive into it right now. So you bought your first fourplex, or your first two fourplexes, in what year? In 2000?
9-10. It was really early, right in the middle of when everyone said don't buy real estate. That was literally everything that I've done, from when I started my cell phone business to when I started buying real estate to when I started restaurants, was always the absolute worst times to be doing it.
So you spent an entire decade building a real estate portfolio. Boom, COVID-19 hits, and a few months later, you're like, hey, I have a cool idea. Why don't I get into the restaurant business? Why?
How does that quite go exactly like that? But let's talk theory and big picture, right? So you're exactly right. I spent a decade plus scaling from multifamily to learning single family to starting to buy strip malls that I was located in, my cell phone stores, absolute triple net restaurants, things like Dollar Generals, Perkins, all that kind of fun stuff. And really learning the real estate industry, learning leases, learning commercial real estate, all this kind of stuff. And then the pandemic happened. And in one day, I had 42 of my tenants call me and tell me that they were going to go to business, that they were going to lose everything, that they were forced to close their doors, et cetera. Like the whole world. So it's a reminder of cell phone days, where everything's going up, and amazing. And then like, oh shit. And it created a lot of like, whoa. And so started looking around, and, we navigated that and all this kind of stuff. And then as the world started to, listen, about halfway through a year into the pandemic, you've got to start to realize one of two things is going to happen. We're either all dead or we're going to be fine. And that's really like, that's just kind of the two options that there were. And I believe in America. I believed we were going to bounce back. I believed we were going to do this. The government started incentivizing things. Rates were dropping. My tenants were starting to go. And I said, okay, now is the time that we look at investing and doing some different things. And that's when I found Everbowl. Everbowl is an acai bowl chain. It's like a create your own fruit bowl, kind of like Chipotle, but fruit. And you go through a simple line, and they're very small square footage. And most importantly, I actually loved the food. It started with just absolute love of the food and the process. I come from Iowa, meat and potatoes, and I started eating this food, and it was delicious. And then, Drew Brees came in, and he was buying the rights to a few states, and I made an investment into the corporate company, and it started to show this opportunity that maybe other than just real estate, we should look at some of the repeatable businesses and then eventually merging everything together. And I really think that's the future. I really think if you look at where things are going, Blackstone just buying Tropical Smoothie for $2 billion and Orange Theory getting purchased, all these big repeatable concepts are starting to be looked at really attractive. And I think that that's going to continue to be the future. It's been my theory now for a while.
There's so many ways that I could take it here, but I want to talk about Everbowl for a little bit more. What is it about that business model? Because here's the thing, right? Like, I know when we're talking high level restaurants, and just like food and beverage in general, low margins, like razor thin margins, hard to truly make a profit. Only at scale can you truly make a profit. And especially in the franchise model, right? When you're obviously like you're getting the benefit of the proven process, the marketing, all that stuff. But like, you're also like, a lot of your paycheck, a lot of your profits going or revenues going to the franchisor. What is it about Everbowl that stood out to you that made you believe that it was a good business decision?
Yeah. So for me, is all about repeatability. And when I got into real estate, I bought a lot of 3-bed, 1-bath, 1-stall houses, like I said before, and I would paint them all the same color, and I'd rent them all for $1,100 to $1,200 a piece. We knew before I even bought it what I could do with it. And essentially with Everbowl, as we keep scaling this, we're able to predict a lot of those things and actually create the business model before we even open the business, right? So I can find the right square footage, and we can actually know our build out costs before I even sign the lease. I can know my lease amount before I even sign the lease. I can know the traffic counts. I can know the demographics. I can know my other anchor. I can know my competitive analysis. I could actually put a lot of different inputs in to get a pretty good idea where my sales will be before I even open. And then on top of that, I have national pricing on food. I have a national, I have all of these systems to help us with labor management, scale, cost of goods, all of these kind of things. And so while the restaurant industry is it's looked upon very poorly, because most restaurants are owned by chefs, and chefs have a creative mindset where they can make amazing pork belly, but maybe line items on a P&L aren't the top priority for them. And so by using a business background with the food background, restaurants are a hockey stick. And once those expenses are paid, yes, the margins are very thin up front, and you've got to get that rent paid and your employees and the cost of goods. And yes, you've got your franchise fee. But if you look at the prices I can buy things for, I could never do that if it was Justin's acai concept. And if you look at the systems I'm part of and the marketing and all these other things that we get as part of that, it actually is a very repeatable model. And I can tell, I can tell before I even sign a lease about where my profit margin will be on a specific range of sales. And then on top of that, we're debt free because our same syndicate investor group that was buying real estate is also funding the restaurants. And so we don't have to worry about interest rates or all these kind of weird things that go on. And that's what really gives us that extra edge, is all of our competitors are first-time restaurateurs, don't know their COGS, are learning marketing, and then they also have an 11% SBA loan. And if you're trying to figure out all those things at once, that's really, really tricky. Whereas with me, I've got the entire state of Texas. If you look at just Dallas alone, we already have 7 locations there. There's 7 million people. We could put another 12+ locations there, and we can be really picky on location, really picky on rent, really picky on traffic flow. And we know when we stick that location in there that it will, create X revenue, as all of our stores do.
Okay. All of that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, how does this because this is where I'm trying to understand kind of like how this all comes together. Because you were saying, I think that the business concept with the real estate concept and like melding it together. So are you like eventually thinking like more of like a McDonald's model where like you own the real estate, put the business in there, right? And then run the business, but then also you're owning the is that what you're thinking? Or?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things in play right here. So we still have our real estate arm. Obviously, we know that real estate's really tough right now. Deals are not penciling. You've got to come with a lot of capital to the table. So we're looking at acquiring real estate. We also have our restaurant arm. So we're always looking, and we're actively opening more restaurants right now. But my long-term goal is to merge these two. And to be honest, I really think we're going to actually add more concepts into our portfolio over the next few years. Given the success that we've had with Everbowl, almost every week a new company is reaching out to me saying, scale me in Texas, So I think about 5-7 years down the road, what if we had 3 or 4 concepts? What if we had a fitness concept or a restaurant or this or multiple and then different things? Why couldn't we build a piece of real estate, put 3 or 4 of our concepts in there from day one? Now we not only own the real estate, but we also own. Or you want to talk about real value add, why don't we buy a strip mall that needs a little bit of love, and we'll put a little bit of our concepts in there. We'll give ourselves a little bit of TI, and we'll stack the deck in our own favor. And I really believe that the future is that people and real estate investors will not just want to own the real estate, but they'll also want to own a piece of the businesses as well. And so we have the 2 arms right now. And I think at some point, I'm still really young, but in the long run, we're going to merge this whole thing that will give people a bite of all of the apple if they'd like it. And then people can drive around different communities and own a little bit of that building, a little bit of that business, and a little bit of this. And what are they doing? They're helping create jobs. They're helping add value to their communities, and they're getting to be part of those things that are around them.
You know, man, that's so smart. And now that, like, as you're saying it, like, the vision's already being painted for me, because you're right. Like, you know, before, real estate investors, they're like, okay, think about someone who owned a strip mall like in the 80s, right? I'm thinking high net worth individual, you know, doctor, engineer, lawyer, don't really have time to do a lot of the day-to-day stuff, but they just needed somewhere to park their money. Nowadays, what you're seeing is the birth of the real estate entrepreneur. Guys like you, guys like me, we're going out there. We already understand business because we've probably run a few businesses, and now we're also getting into real estate. And so having that acumen going into real estate and like applying that to real estate investing, and you could just apply it to different businesses. That makes so much sense to me. And by the way, there's a tremendous amount of value there, because if your investment group owns the businesses inside of the real estate that you are operating in, that is like, dude, the margins on the profit on that could be insane.
Bingo, right?
Insane.
So for a normal landlord gets about 10 cents, about 10% of rent goes to a landlord, right? 10% rent to sales ratio is kind of what they're looking at. But there's another 15 to 20% that comes out the end as profit margin. So for every dollar that walks in and gets spent at that strip mall, there's 30 cents in there. The landlord's only been getting 10 cents. The local small business owner's been getting the rest of it. The reality is that as time scales on and as repeatable, like, why wouldn't you want to have 50 Everbowls and 100 Jimmy Johns and 200 of the, you know, there's franchisors out there that own 26 or 2,800 locations of different businesses, Applebee's, Chili's, 400 Arby's, all that kind of stuff. And I really believe that creating a venue for people to invest into these repeatable models and get a chunk of that slightly bigger percent of money is there. And then we don't, like I said, we don't have to worry about interest rates and those other troubles right now, and are able to expand when others aren't able to.
So you're buying into these franchises unencumbered, then, like, you're buying the right, or you're not, like, I guess I don't know enough about like Everbowl or like those sorts of models to really like speak in like high level, but like, I'm assuming some franchisees could probably finance part of it, or maybe not, but you're not financing it.
Yeah, for sure.
What
I mean,
hearing.
repeatable businesses are very financeable. You know, there's, I mean, obviously there's small business loans, there's bank loans, there's other things. And then, you know, the more that something's been around, you know, like Taco Bell is considered the creme de la creme when it comes to QSRs, right? They have crazy sales. You can raise prices by 3% every year. Plus they grow sales by 3 to 5% every year. What a great business to be in. I think the biggest chunk of wing zones or wing stops, just sold for like a 13 multiple, like 50 some wing stops.
Really?
And it's becoming very, very popular that if you've got a model that can do it times 10, why wouldn't you do it times 50 or times 100? And, you know, and all of a sudden, I mean, every month we're opening another one. I mean, nationwide, we're opening one every 6 days right now. And you want to talk about being able to duplicate something really, really well? Do it every 6 days for years.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting too, because like, especially something like what you just said, like the Everbowl thing, right? Like, so it sounds like that's like I'm not going to like name drop, like Vitality Bowl, right? Like, I'm assuming that's like a competitor or something like of yours, or like, Okay. So like health foods plus like fitness plus something else, plus like, I could see the stack happening already, right? I could see the stack, and I could already see the box being built out for it. Or if you've already got a pre-existing retail center, kind of retrofitting it to like kind of be a box of what you want it to be. That's brilliant, dude.
Pick any chain, and if the later you go, the less territory you're going to get. But let's take Everbowl. You know, Everbowl, I really believe that there is a entire market for a build your own healthy bowl. It's been proven in salads. It's been proven with Chipotle. It's been proven with a number of different models, but there's nobody that had built a brand like Everbowl had around this. And that's what really attracted me to it. Now, obviously with it being a younger brand, there's more risk or whatever, but if we fast forward a few years, I really believe that there'll be 500 and 700 and 1,000 of these. There's 1,000 tropical smoothies already. They proved that people want to have a meal out of a smoothie. I'm proving that I believe people want to have a meal out of a bowl, and they also want to higher end create your own type of experience with it. Then go into the sandwich category, go into the pizza category, go into the fitness category, whatever it might be. I would love to own little bits of these, businesses that are in all of these areas across the country, because the systems are all the same. We can just change the ownership groups a little bit and provide these meals, provide these opportunities, provide these businesses to different communities at the same time.
Yeah, when you own the business too, like I'm just thinking of it, like if you own the business as well, your margins improve on the business, because obviously like when you own the real estate, your overhead's going to be lower. So that's like bonus number one. Number two, I'm assuming, in the restaurant industry, the depreciation benefits can be pretty good. So like there's plenty of tax incentives, right? For owning something like that.
Yeah. So because I syndicated a lot of our real estate as we started growing, I also created a syndicate group for our restaurants. And what we do is we raise for 3 to 6 locations at a time in different markets. And then people are actually owners in the LLC of those restaurants. So if they own 4%, for every dollar that we make, they get 4% of depreciation, 4% of cash flow. They get a K1 at the end of every year for 4%. And that's it. There's no waterfall structures or this or whatever. It's just simply an equity play. And then as people drive around Dallas or Austin or here or wherever, it's like, hey, I own a couple percent of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, one of these, and it becomes fun because they're literally helping us create jobs. And then they come to our grand openings and they're standing in line and high-fiving. And it's like, it's a different kind of investment, but it's also pretty lucrative. And if we keep growing sales, even 8-10% every year, and eventually I really believe we're going to be a national brand that everyone will know who we are. And how cool will it be to have the next Chipotle or the next, whatever pizza chain, whatever it might be, that's a household name. I really believe that Everbowl has a good chance of being that leader and that winner. And if we can create a syndicate group with hundreds of people that are part of all of these, it's a cool place for our company to be part of.
So let's talk about the syndicate real quick, right? So obviously you started investing, presumably like that first deal, it sounded like that was your own money.
Yeah. For the first, I think 5 or 6 years was my own money. I never really wanted any partners. But eventually it happens. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, like that is what happens, right? Like you can't do $50 million deals, $20 million deals, $100 million, like without raising capital. Like, I remember so when I was in my early 20s, I had this aha moment. I was sitting in the Bacchanal buffet at Caesar's Palace, and I'm like, I want to own one of these one day. And for like that moment on, dude, like owning a hotel on the Strip has been like my number one North Star. And at first, like for the first 8 years of my career, I had it in my mind that I had to make $5 billion to afford a hotel on the Strip. And then
I know exactly
realized
the mindset.
For
real. I mean, I grew up single mom with 3 boys. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I still haven't met my dad. Okay. I had a very minimal mindset. Let's be real. Like, we didn't have food on our tables growing up. We had to buy our own clothes from age 15. Do you think I have a network about raising money and building a capital stack and all this are you kidding me? Give me a break. We need to, it was $1 Tostino's pizzas. That's what we thought about on Fridays. But the reality was, so when I built my first cell phone business, it was 100% me. I was actually the only employee the first 4 months. When I opened my first store, I worked open to close 7 days a week for 4 months before I actually hired someone. And then another person. I literally grew it, just like you said, like thinking I had to grow to $5 billion all by myself.
Yeah.
But the reality was I didn't have to do that. So then I started doing real estate. What did I do? I did it all myself again. And then finally it was like someone like, let me buy a little bit of that building. Let me go in on that one with you. Let me go on to that with you. And I just said, okay, well, if you do that, I get a couple points on the deal for putting it all together. They said, done. Absolutely. You're helping me. It's a win-win. I'm like, wait a second. Oh, wait, there's tons of people out there in the world that have money that need people to help them execute models.
Right. Right.
And that's when it all changed for me, was essentially when I realized that my skill set wasn't just how to make money in a restaurant or a piece of real estate or a cell phone store. My skill set was being able to arbitrage dollars, and a lot of dollars. And if I could provide that skill set to other people, then all of a sudden I can scale whatever I want. You know, Gary Vee calls it his Death Star. He has all these companies, all these investors, all these whatever, but he calls it his Death Star, because when he points his Death Star at something, it's incredible how much that thing works, right? And I look at it as my syndicate group and what we're building and what we're doing. We point it at something, we say, Everbowl, grow. This company, grow. This real estate, grow. And we can go and put dollars and execute business models behind it. Now it gets really fun.
That's amazing, man. No, it's awesome. And I love that. Your skill set's being able to arbitrage dollars. That's super important for people to understand. Like, people who run syndicates like yourself, that's really the skill set, right? When you're putting together a fund, when you're putting together whatever, a syndication deal, so many people talk about vetting the sponsor, right? To make sure that they are who they say they are. Because if you're doing the vetting correctly, then you should be thinking about it as in those terms, right? Like, is this person going to be able to arbitrage my dollars? Like, do they have the skill set necessary to do that?
And can they identify opportunities that allow for others to be part of it as well, right? Because saying, I'll just take your dollars, and yes, we can scale everything. But as you know, when you could look at 5 pieces of real estate and 4.5 of them won't work if you put it outside money, you know? And so you have to understand the structuring of deals and how to manage them and how to take all that kind of stuff comes into play. And I'm so glad that I started by doing everything myself, you know, because I learned how much that every one of those decisions mattered. And I loved that I was playing and learning with my own dollars, because you don't want to learn with other people's investments either. And that's one thing, you know, if you want to talk about tips, you know, a tip I recently heard that I couldn't agree with more is investors do not want to help you build the rocket. They want to be your fuel. And once I had the rocket built and I was buying real estate, doing another one, all of a sudden people are like, hey man, can I put a little fuel in that? And now the same thing's happening with restaurants. As we grow one and add another, you know, early on I was like, that idiot, why would he be getting into restaurants, all this? And now all of a sudden, like 2 weeks ago, we just opened our 9th one. And what happens every time we're posting, we're opening another one. It's like, hey, can I add a little fuel to that? Can I add a little fuel to that? And that's really how we have to position ourselves, is we're not necessarily the restaurateurs, the real estate people, we're the rocket builders. And that's what we need to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a tremendous amount of sense. So obviously you've had a tremendous amount of success, Justin, over the last, call it 15 years or so, but no journey's without its, you know, share of challenges, setbacks and whatnot. So what would you say has been the greatest setback in your investing journey so far? And we'll extend that, you know, investing journey to the restaurants and like everything, right? What has been the biggest setback, and how were you able to kind of get to the other side of it?
I think the biggest thing for me over my long career has just been understanding proper bet sizing. And that goes back to my poker days, right? You would never put all of your chips in one hand and hope for the best, right? And even early in my career, I went all in on cell phones, and I had a disproportionate amount of my chips involved in cell phones. And then as we've gone on. And so I think that just one of the biggest things to remember as you're going through life and going through building businesses and ups and downs and what happens if there's another pandemic or interest rates double or this or whatever, is understanding bet sizing to different asset classes at different times when different things are in your favors. And even though right now real estate might not be the best asset class due to high interest rates, due to a lot of competition, due to different things, well, guess what? I have other asset classes that we can put some into, and we can bet on different things that still help us win. And I'm just really glad, because I would have just stayed all in on real estate and bought at the top in 2021 and doubled and tripled down on real estate. Really, you know, I would be nervous right now because a lot of my debt would be recycling a lot higher. And unfortunately, I'm in a completely different ballpark where I don't have to think about any of that kind of stuff. And it's just, we're just churning and burning, keep on growing.
So what was that inner voice? What was the thing that caused you to pivot in 2020 when honestly buying real estate was sexier than anything, right? Like the rates were so low. Everyone was like all in on real estate. And you were like, actually, let me go to this like failing business model and see if I can kind of like, well, not saying Everbowl was, right? But just saying restaurants in general, right? Like every restaurant in America was closing down, right? So like,
for sure. And not only that, I started selling some of my real estate. I mean, I started selling some of my real estate in 2020, 2021, when everybody was buying it left and right, and they were paying these crazy prices. And, in residential, people were buying houses for 10% over ask with no inspections and no all this kind of stuff. And listen, when you've been in the game long enough, one of the rules that I always live by is if you're not willing to sell it to someone for that, then essentially you're buying it for that price. So if somebody's if I buy a strip mall for $1 million and somebody offered me 1.6 for it, if I don't sell it to them at 1.6, I just bought it myself for 1.6. Okay. And the reality is when things got really crazy in 2021, I did not want to rebuy my entire real estate portfolio at 2021 prices. And there were many properties where we had executed great business plans. We had gotten our return that we needed to, and it made sense to exit it. And then when you exit that, you begin to look at other opportunities and opportunities that maybe everybody's not paying as much attention to. And as I said before, I believe in America. I believed America would come back. I believed we wouldn't all die. I believe that people will still need to eat. And on top of that, I believe that they're going to look for healthier options, better for you options in reasonable price points, and I didn't want to do $100 a person steak dinner. I wanted to do an $11 a person grab and go quickly in and out that everybody can be part of. And that was the moment for me where I knew I didn't want to rebuy a lot of stuff. And I thought I had a new thesis. And if that thesis was right, and so far we're a couple of years down the road, it's starting to really prove itself out. But that's not to say the thesis doesn't change, or here's that, and we just keep on making the best move every single moment whenever we can.
So the framing then was simply, would I be willing to buy my portfolio at the price that I could sell it at today? And at some point, the answer became no. And that was when you knew it was time to liquidate.
Absolutely. I really think it's that simple. If I buy a house for 120 grand and my plan is to make $400 a month on it in cash flow, okay, let's just throw a random deal out there. Okay. My goal is to cash flow $5 grand a year, and somebody walks up and offers me 170 for the house. That is 10 years worth of cash flow. And I never have to hear about a leaky toilet, somebody, mowing the lawn improperly, vacancy, roof leak or whatever. You're going to pay me 10 years and I don't have to do any of that. Sold. That's it. It's that simple to me.
Yep.
Because I executed my game plan. I bought something, and then listen, now I'm sitting here and I can rebuy back that $170,000 house for $145 or $150. And that's just the reality was as when people are acting irrational and doing irrational things, that I told myself, if I bought this house for 170, that would be irrational. So I should sell it because I would love to sell it to an irrational person. But why not?
Yeah, I could not agree more with that mentality, with like that thought process. I mean, it's a very interesting thought process. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone articulate it quite like that before. So in a lot of ways, I feel like,
most people just want to buy real estate and hold it forever. But, real estate is cyclical. And listen, when interest rates were really low, people overpaid for things strictly because of what their monthly payment would be. And I like to liken this to cars or vehicles, okay? I have a nice GMC Denali truck, okay? When I bought it was $70,000 and, very low interest rate, and my payment was $800 a month, okay? Well, all of a sudden, the truck goes to be $110,000, but interest rates are still next to nothing because there's no supply, whatever. And people would pay $100,000+ for the same truck simply because, well, we can pay it. Interest rates are cheap, all that kind of stuff. Well, now all of a sudden cars, interest rates are way up and nobody wants to pay $100,000 for a truck when your interest rate's 9%.
Yeah.
And I think that real estate is the exact same. And I think people bought houses and properties because their payment short-term was low, but that doesn't mean the value of the property or the value of the vehicle is actually, just because you can arbitrage it and have a low payment does not mean that your actual price on that item that you bought was a good price. And that's just the reality of it, is that not everybody, but a lot of people overpaid for items in 2020 and 2021 strictly because their payments would be low on it, not because the actual item was worth more. And that's a great way to go. I mean, there's a great space to go arbitrage in any industry if those are the metrics that people are buying.
Yeah. And I mean, I think as an investor, you're always looking at, obviously you're looking at cash flows, you're looking at, what the margins look like. But at the end of the day, your lens is a lot different than like the average Americans. And this is why I think investing in the residential space is so fascinating to me, because in the commercial sector, it's purely numbers driven. But in the residential sector, there is an arbitrage there that you just talked about, where you are arbitraging on people's emotions.
Absolutely.
And it's super fascinating because you can make a lot of money playing that way, and you can get totally burned doing it that way too.
Well, you can also, in commercial, you could absolutely play the same game. So I like to look at commercial real estate based upon price per square foot, right? Because I can then look at 3 properties on the same block and get some sort of average on them. But a lot of people want to look at properties based upon cap rate. Well, what happens if all the cap rates are the same, but one property has rents that are twice as much as the other properties? If I'm emotionally attached to a property that's over rented and all of a sudden there's a vacancy, well, now I can't fill that vacancy for the same as everywhere else. And so a lot of times people buy trophy properties in commercial real estate as well, because they really want to own that corner or that mall, or they love that restaurant or that tenant or whatever. And I've done that. That's a mistake that I made early on, is I bought the corporate headquarters of a company that I loved and I thought it was a great company and all this kind of stuff. And after 5 years, they went belly up and I had a 10,000 square foot office building vacant. And you just cannot buy off of emotions. One of those many lessons to learn.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, we're coming up on time here. I have a couple other questions that I wanted to ask you. The first one being, our audience, there's active investors. There's also people that invest more like LPs, like in syndications and whatnot. So what would your top 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you'd give to someone who's looking to, diversify their investment portfolio? We'll start with active managers first, and then maybe move on more to like passive investors. And we'll extend that to franchises and restaurants as well. So what advice could you give for someone that's looking to kind of like diversify and hedge heading into this next decade? It sounds like you've been historically very right with your line of thought. So I'm curious to hear what you say.
Well, I think one thing that I would say to active investors, and I needed to hear this 10, 15 years ago, is listen, just because we're doing great things doesn't mean that other people aren't doing great things too. And attaching yourself, even a really small investment, to other people that are doing great things is really, really important, because now we get to see things through other lenses. And I'm invested into other franchises, other restaurants, other real estate deals that I don't even manage. I'm part of as many things as I can be, because it gives me lots of different ways to see the market. On top of that, as I began to syndicate different things, I became a much better person with investor relations, because I learned how companies communicate with me. And I can tell you, I hate it when companies don't communicate. And so every quarter we send our investors updates. Every single quarter we send them P&Ls of every single restaurant. We host, town halls with even people, brand president, CEO of Everbowl, to educate people on what we're doing. And if you just do everything yourself and you don't see other deals out there, it's hard to know how great we really are. And so go out and be part of other deals and attach yourself to other people that are doing amazing things. And you'll end up becoming better and being better for your investors because of it.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually, it's another way of paying for education, right? But instead you're actually like making money for your education, right? Because you've invested money, but theoretically, if you're investing correctly, you're making a return on that investment, and at the same time you're getting educated. That's it's almost like being a mole, right? In someone else's, or having a mole in someone else's business, right? Because you're really getting to see it from the front lines.
I can't tell you how many other restaurateurs are investors in my restaurants. I mean, I've got one guy, and his business is actually all like mobile, going and setting up parties, and it's a different item, not in the same space. But he actually works with tells some of our people how to do different things, and we're telling him how to do different things. And all of a sudden, right, we're learning from each other for that exact reason. Why wouldn't you? I mean, I'm somebody who owns a bunch of cold stone, all this kind of different things. Well, hey, listen, we're both wanting to win. We're not even in the same markets. What else can we learn from each other? How do I look at things? How do they look at things? And the more of those lenses are in place, the more we all get better.
What about like an LP, right? Like someone that's more passive, they're looking to maybe diversify their investment portfolio. Maybe they only have they've got their IRA set up and everything, but they're like, they finally realized they've broken free from the matrix and realized the stock market isn't all that it's cracked up to be. What advice would you give to someone kind of like looking to diversify right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you raise your hand and just put on LinkedIn, hey, I'm looking to invest in companies, you're probably not going to get the best intros to the best deals. But what I would recommend for people, like if you're actively investing in real estate or looking to invest in real estate, you should find other people around you that are invested into that. And then from that, ask them what else they're investing in and what else they're investing in. And always start with referrals. I mean, with referrals, you're instantly going to have someone that already has a relationship. You're not going to have to be the first person. And then if it happens to be a bad deal or bad syndicate or whatever, hey, listen, that was part of the learning process that I went through, and I went through it with other people. And this is what we learned, and this is why we're better in the future. And then same thing when it comes to restaurant or businesses or crypto or whatever it might be that you're interested in investing in, you should find other people that you can talk to and have that kind of relationship and ask those kind of questions. And, there's crypto groups out there, and there's small business people out there, and there's all these kind of things. And then figure out how to get into those rooms, get into those networks, and see things through different visions. Or honestly, just write whatever the smallest check is to learn. I can't tell, we lowered down our minimum to 25 grand for that exact reason, for a couple of reasons actually. But the main reason was I actually agree with people. You shouldn't have to pay 100 grand to learn if an investment's a good one or if a company you're part of is a good one. And also on top of that, I wanted to give people the ability to invest a smaller amount into more chunks of restaurants. So if you want to put 25 grand into 3 different batches of restaurants, now you have 9 or 12 restaurants that you have diversification in instead of one. So go and make some small bets and learn. I used the poker analogy earlier, but paying a couple dollars to see the next card is completely different than putting all of your chips in blind. And I think it's really important that we make bets as we get information and start small with your bets.
I'm loving the poker analogies, by the way. Are you ever in Vegas? Yeah. Are you ever in Vegas, bro? We should go. All right, dude. Like, we're going to link up then, because I definitely want to.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man.
It's so funny, the link between business people and poker player. Some of the best business people that I know are always in backroom card games because they love it, and they love the grind, and they love the competition, and it's very, very similar to business, and making sure that you protect your pot, you protect all these kind of things, you make the best decision every moment that you can, and then not be results oriented. That's the biggest thing, is sometimes we're going to make bad decisions. Sometimes but we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep growing, keep learning. I love the analogies between poker and business as well.
Yeah, man. No, that's awesome. And I definitely, as I've got, because I've only been playing for maybe a year and a half now. And as I've started to develop the skill and everything, I've noticed so much, it's just a lot of things that you can apply in poker to business. It's funny, you just saying all these analogies, and I'm like, yep, spot on. So Love it, man. Well, you've been awesome. This has been great, and I feel like we could do this for like another hour or two. You know, so definitely have to have you on.
I need to interview you sometime about all the hotel stuff because again, I think the more of us that are mixing together business and real estate and talking about how do we divide them, but also merge them and create those opportunities for others, I think there's going to be some real opportunities for us in the future that are presenting these arbitrages for investors and for people. So congrats with what you're doing, man. And I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this has been awesome, Justin. And in traditional Gould Mine fashion, we're going to have you leave the audience with one final gold nugget.
All right. But if I had to give one final nugget, it would be if you're going to do anything once or twice, go do it 50 or 100 times. We talked restaurants today, but I've got friends that own restaurants and every one of them has a different menu and a different layout and a different everything, and they're pulling their hair out. But when you own the same thing and you do it over and over and over again, or real estate over and over and over again, it really does get easier each one and you get better with each one. And then when you have problems, you can fix it a lot sooner. So rather than zig and zag all over the place, find one thing, double, triple, quadruple down on it and get as many as you can.
I freaking love that, man. Thank you so much, Justin. You are the man.
Thank you, sir.